He told everyone I was just a housewife at the reunion. Next week, I rejected his firm's merger proposal as the mysterious so he'd been desperately trying to meet for months. 10 years ago I was the woman everyone overlooked. Now I was the CEO every boardroom feared. And it all started with 6 words spoken carelessly at a high school reunion. Sarah? Oh, she's just a housewife. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for being part of this incredible journey. If you're enjoying these stories of empowerment, consider subscribing. It's completely free and helps us build this amazing community. Let's dive in. The reunion hall buzzed with the familiar hum of nostalgia and forced small talk. Soft jazz played in the background, a soundtrack to a scene I'd soon transform into my personal turning point. I stood near the refreshment table, my simple black dress a stark contrast to the flashy cocktail numbers surrounding me. My hair, pulled back in a neat ponytail, screamed suburban conformity. But beneath the carefully crafted exterior, a storm was brewing. Michael Roberts, my target, held court near the far wall, surrounded by a cluster of former classmates who hung on his every word. He'd always been that guy. Charismatic, successful, loud. The type who believed success was measured by the volume of his voice and the breadth of his professional conquests. I watched him calculating. Each laugh, each boastful story was a thread I was mentally weaving into a tapestry of revenge. Sarah Thompson, his voice cut through the room like a knife. Last I heard, she settled into the perfect housewife role. The words dripped with condescension. A ripple of polite chuckles followed, the kind of laugh that's more about social alignment than genuine humor. I'd heard worse. Far worse. But this moment, this casual dismissal, would become the catalyst. My journey hadn't been conventional. While others climbed corporate ladders, I'd been building something different. Quietly. Strategically. A network that stretched across industries. A business empire constructed in stolen moments between school runs and family dinners. The world saw a housewife. I saw a CEO in waiting. Michael didn't know about the tech startup I'd quietly nurtured. Didn't know about the venture capital funds I'd strategically invested in. Didn't know that the modest suburban home he imagined was just a carefully maintained facade. My phone buzzed. A message from my COO. Another detail Michael would never suspect. Our latest acquisition was complete. Another piece of a complex chess game I'd been playing for years. The reunion continued around me. Old classmates shared stories, rekindled connections, compared life achievements. But I was already elsewhere. My mind was mapping out the next phase of my plan, the intricate process of dismantling Michael's professional ego. He represented everything I'd fought against. The systemic underestimation of women who choose different paths. The assumption that a woman's worth is defined by her visibility in traditional corporate structures. I would become his professional nightmare, a ghost he couldn't predict or control. As the evening progressed, I maintained my carefully crafted persona. Soft smile. Polite nods. The perfect picture of domestic contentment. But behind my eyes, a strategic mind was always working, always planning. Michael approached me near the end of the night, probably feeling magnanimous after his earlier comments. "Sarah, you're looking well," he said, his tone patronizing. "Still keeping busy at home?" I met his gaze. Calm. Collected. "Absolutely," I replied, my voice smooth as silk. "Always something to do. If he only knew. The next week would change everything. The merger proposal would be my first move, a chess piece positioned precisely to upend his entire world. Michael's firm had been desperately seeking a mysterious CEO, a powerful entity that had been just beyond their reach. They would soon discover that the housewife they'd dismissed was about to become their greatest professional challenge. As I drove home that night, the suburban streets silent around me, I allowed myself a small smile. Revenge, I'd learned, was not about loud explosions or dramatic confrontations. It was about precision. Strategy. The kind of calculated move that would make Michael, and everyone who'd ever underestimated me, realize their fundamental mistake. 10 years of preparation were about to pay off. And it would be beautiful. My home office was nothing like what Michael, or anyone from the reunion, would expect. Behind the facade of suburban tranquility lay a command center that would make most tech startups look amateur. 3 massive monitors lined the wall, each displaying real-time global market data. Trading algorithms I'd personally developed ran silently in the background, generating revenue streams that most investment banks would envy. This was Quantum Horizon Technologies. My creation, my weapon. I pulled up the files on Michael's firm. Not just surface-level information but deep, granular data that revealed every weakness, every potential pressure point. My network of information ran deep. A web of connections cultivated over years of strategic relationship building. The journey hadn't been accidental. After my first child was born, I'd watched the world try to reduce me to nothing more than a mother. But motherhood had been my greatest strategic advantage. While others saw interrupted careers, I saw an opportunity to rebuild from scratch. Late nights weren't spent on mindless television. They were education sessions, online courses in advanced computer science, blockchain technology, venture capital strategies. My children's nap times became coding sessions. School pickups were scheduled around international conference calls. My first major breakthrough came unexpectedly. An algorithm I developed to optimize family scheduling morphed into a revolutionary supply chain management system. The first investor who saw its potential wrote a check that changed everything. But I kept it quiet. Strategic silence was my greatest weapon. Quantum Horizon wasn't just a tech company. It was a carefully constructed instrument of precision. We didn't just develop technology. We anticipated market needs before they became apparent. Our predictive AI models were years ahead of competitors, quietly revolutionizing entire industries. I recalled the early days. My husband, supportive but confused, would find me surrounded by technical manuals and complex mathematical models. Another hobby, he'd ask. If he only knew that these hobbies were constructing an empire. The phone rang. So Elena, a brilliant mind I'd recruited from MIT. The European expansion is ready, she said. No pleasantries. No small talk. We communicated in the language of strategy and execution. Proceed, I responded. 2 words that would trigger a cascade of economic movements worth billions. My success wasn't about luck. It was about seeing the invisible connections others missed. While traditional corporate structures saw boundaries, I saw opportunities. Each limitation placed on me, as a woman, as a mother, as a housewife, became a strategic advantage. The tech industry loved its prodigy stories. Young men fresh out of Stanford or MIT, changing the world from a garage. My story would be different. I'd change the world from a suburban kitchen between making lunches and helping with homework. My children knew parts of my world. My daughter, now 12, was already showing signs of the same strategic thinking. Mom, she'd say, analyzing her school social dynamics, it's all about understanding the underlying system. She was learning early what took me years to understand. The merger proposal to Michael's firm wasn't just a business move. It was a statement. A declaration that the systems of power were changing. That invisible networks were more powerful than visible hierarchies. I pulled up the latest financial projections. Quantum Horizon's growth was exponential but always calculated. No wild risks. Every move precisely measured. Our AI models predicted market shifts with an accuracy that bordered on prescience. The wall of monitors shifted. Global market data, our current projects, predictive models. A symphony of information that told a story far more complex than any reunion small talk could capture. My phone buzzed. Another acquisition target identified. Another opportunity to reshape an industry. The world saw a housewife. They would soon see a force of technological and economic transformation. Michael and his colleagues believed they understood power. They understood nothing. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across my meticulously organized office, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about rewriting the narrative of what's possible. The next move was already in motion. And no one, absolutely no one, saw it coming. Revenge is an art form. And like any masterpiece, it requires meticulous preparation. I spent the next 3 days in near total isolation. My team knew better than to interrupt. The children were with their father for a carefully planned extended weekend. My office transformed into a war room, every digital and physical resource dedicated to dismantling Michael Roberts. His firm, Roberts Global Enterprises, wasn't just another target. It was a complex ecosystem I needed to understand at a cellular level. I pulled every thread of information. Public records, financial statements, leaked internal communications, social media traces, professional networks. Most would see a stack of documents. I saw a living, breathing organism with vulnerabilities waiting to be exploited. Michael's professional reputation was built on aggressive mergers and strategic acquisitions. But every aggressive strategy leaves scars. Every conquest creates enemies. My job was to find those fracture points. I discovered his firm was leveraging a significant loan from a consortium of international banks. The terms were complex with strict performance metrics. One strategic disruption could trigger massive financial penalties. His recent acquisition of a mid-sized tech firm in Southeast Asia was particularly interesting. The integration was messy. Cultural misalignments. Technological incompatibilities. A pressure point waiting to be pressed. Elena entered with an encrypted tablet. The deep dive report on Roberts Global, she said. No greeting. No small talk. We communicated in the language of pure strategy. The report was a masterpiece of investigative intelligence. Not just numbers and facts, but the invisible connections that truly define a corporate ecosystem. Michael's key executives. Their personal motivations. Their individual weaknesses. One name stood out. David Chin, his chief technology officer. Recent divorce. Significant financial strain. Professional reputation recently questioned after a failed internal project. Target identified, I muttered. My approach wouldn't be a frontal assault. That was for amateurs. This would be surgical. A precision strike that would dismantle everything Michael believed he had built. Quantum Horizons AI models began running complex simulations. Thousands of potential scenarios, each calculated with microscopic precision. We weren't just planning a merger rejection. We were orchestrating a complete professional deconstruction. The merger proposal we'd draft wouldn't just be a business document. It would be a psychological weapon. I thought back to that reunion. Those 6 dismissive words. She's just a housewife. Each memory fueled my strategy but never clouded my judgment. Emotion was a tool to be wielded, not a force that could control me. My phone buzzed. A message from my daughter. Saw your Bloomberg interview clip. You were awesome, Mom. A rare smile crossed my face. He was learning. Understanding that power isn't announced, it's demonstrated. The next 48 hours would be crucial. Every digital trace needed to be perfect. Every communication calculated. We would become a ghost in Michael's corporate machinery. I pulled up the preliminary merger proposal draft. It wasn't just a document. It was a trap meticulously designed. Each clause a potential trigger. Each page a psychological manipulation. The beauty of true revenge isn't destruction. It's transformation. Making someone understand deeply and profoundly the magnitude of their miscalculation. Michael thought he knew the business world. He had no idea what was coming. Our AI had identified 17 potential intervention points in Roberts Global's current portfolio. 17 opportunities to apply strategic pressure. Not all would be used, but each represented a potential weapon. David Chin would be our first point of contact. Not directly. Through carefully constructed intermediaries. A whisper here. Suggestion there. Planting seeds of doubt about the firm's current direction. The merger proposal was more than a business document. It was a narrative. A story of potential that would simultaneously attract and repel. Designed to create maximum psychological tension. As midnight approached, I reviewed the final preparations. Each detail checked and rechecked. In the world of high-stakes corporate strategy, there are no second chances. Michael Roberts believed he understood power. He was about to receive a masterclass in true strategic transformation. The first move was ready, and it would change everything. The merger proposal arrived like a phantom, silent, precise, impossibly perfect. Roberts Global's executive team received the document through channels so discreet they seemed to materialize out of thin air. No digital fingerprints. No traceable origin. Just pure strategic communication that would make intelligence agencies proud. I watched the initial reactions through a carefully constructed network of digital surveillance. Not hacking, that was too crude. This was strategic observation, each movement tracked with surgical precision. Michael's first response was typical. Curiosity mixed with professional arrogance. The mysterious CEO behind the proposal had crafted something unprecedented. A merger document that was simultaneously attractive and challenging. Our AI had analyzed thousands of previous merger proposals, identifying exactly what would trigger Michael's competitive instincts. The document wasn't just a business proposition. It was a psychological puzzle designed to consume his every waking moment. Key details were strategically obscured. Enough information to tantalize, not enough to fully comprehend. Each page was a breadcrumb leading to a deeper mystery. David Chin, the CTO I'd identified earlier, was the first to truly dig deeper. His recent professional vulnerabilities made him the perfect entry point. A series of anonymous communications, each perfectly crafted to align with his current professional frustrations, began to circulate. Whispers about innovation. Hints of technological breakthroughs. Subtle suggestions that Roberts Global was falling behind the cutting edge. Elena approached me, a rare look of admiration crossing her face. "It's working," she said. Not a question. A statement of fact. The merger proposal was more than a document. It was a narrative weapon. Each paragraph carefully constructed to create maximum psychological tension. Potential technological synergies that were just beyond comprehension. Financial projections that defied traditional analysis. Michael's team began internal debates. Late-night strategy sessions. Heated discussions about the mysterious proposal's potential. They were doing exactly what we wanted, consuming themselves with speculation. My children would be proud. This was strategy as an art form. The first meeting request came exactly 72 hours after the proposal's delivery. Predictable. Exactly as we had calculated. Michael would want to meet the mysterious CEO, but we would control every aspect of that interaction. A virtual meeting was proposed. Encrypted channels. Anonymous communication platforms. Each layer of communication a carefully constructed illusion. I prepared myself. Not just professionally but psychologically. This wasn't just a business meeting. This was the first act of a carefully orchestrated revenge. The virtual meeting room was a masterpiece of technological manipulation. Our AI had constructed a digital environment that would reveal nothing, yet suggest everything. Background subtly shifting. Voice modulated to remove any identifying characteristics. "Welcome," I began, my voice a perfect blend of professional confidence and strategic mystery. Michael's initial approach was aggressive. Typical. He believed he could dominate any conversation, break down any barrier. He had no idea he was walking into a trap decades in the making. "Your proposal is unconventional," he started, trying to maintain control. I let a calculated pause hang in the air. Silence can be more powerful than words. "Unconventional times require unconventional strategies," I responded. Each word measured. Each syllable a potential weapon. Our AI was running multiple communication analyses simultaneously. Tracking micro-expressions. Analyzing vocal patterns. Building a comprehensive psychological profile with each passing second. David Chin was copied on the communication. Another strategic move. His growing frustration with the current corporate structure would be our secondary infiltration point. The meeting continued. No concrete decisions. No clear resolutions. But something far more important was happening. We were planting seeds of doubt. Creating hairline fractures in Michael's professional confidence. As the virtual meeting concluded, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. This was more than revenge. This was a systematic deconstruction of everything Michael believed about power, success, and professional identity. The first move was complete. And Michael Roberts had no idea what was truly coming. The boardroom at Roberts Global was a temple of corporate masculinity. Mahogany tables. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Artwork strategically chosen to communicate power. Michael sat at the head of the table, the merger proposal spread before him. His team watched, waiting. This was more than a meeting. This was a performance. I was everywhere and nowhere. Our encrypted communication channels were prepared. Every digital pathway carefully constructed. The rejection would be a surgical strike. David Chin sat slightly apart from the others. The seeds we'd planted were germinating. Subtle doubts. Professional frustrations. He was our unintentional ally. "The proposal is unprecedented," Michael began, his voice carrying that familiar tone of condescension. "Unconventional. Challenging." I knew every word. Every potential response had been modeled thousands of times by our AI. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a precise demolition. The first blow would be financial. Our analysis had identified a critical weakness in their current loan structure. One strategic rejection would trigger a cascade of financial complications. Preliminary analysis suggests significant technological synergies, Michael continued. But the details remain ambiguous. Ambiguity was our weapon. We had constructed the proposal to be simultaneously attractive and impossible to fully comprehend. Elena was monitoring everything. Real-time analytics flowing through our secure channels. Every micro-expression. Every vocal modulation. We were dissecting their psychology in real time. The moment approached. Precision was everything. I propose we move forward with. Michael never finished the sentence. Our rejection arrived. Not as a simple no, but as a comprehensive deconstruction of their entire strategic positioning. The digital document was a masterpiece of strategic communication. Each paragraph a calculated strike. Financial projections that exposed hidden vulnerabilities. Technological assessments that questioned their fundamental approach to innovation. David Chen's reaction was the first tell. A subtle shift. A moment of recognition that something fundamental had changed. Michael's face transformed. Confusion first. Then anger. Then a dawning realization that something was fundamentally different. "Who are you?" he muttered. A question that would consume him. The rejection wasn't just about stopping a merger. It was about demonstrating a level of strategic sophistication that would haunt Michael's professional nightmares. Our AI had identified 17 potential pressure points in their current portfolio. The rejection document expertly highlighted 3. Just enough to create maximum psychological tension. The International Banking Consortium monitoring their loan would receive a copy. Subtly. Strategically. Each word a potential trigger for financial reevaluation. Michael's team began their internal discussions. Heated. Confused. Exactly as we had designed. David Chen was the first to speak. "We need to understand more about this proposal's origin." Exactly what we wanted. The rejection wasn't a closed door. It was an invitation to a deeper, more complex game. My phone buzzed. A message from my daughter. "Mom, your stock is up 7% today." She was learning to read the financial markets, understanding that power is both strategic and numerical. Elena entered my office. No words needed. Her expression said everything. Phase 1 was complete. The corporate world Michael knew was about to fundamentally change. He thought he understood power. He understood nothing. The rejection would circulate through professional networks. Each reading would reveal new layers of strategic complexity. A document that was both a weapon and a warning. My reflection in the office window showed something different. Not just a woman. Not just a mother. But a strategic force that would reshape entire industries. The reunion felt like a lifetime ago. Just a housewife, they had said. Now they would learn the true meaning of underestimation. Michael Roberts was about to experience a professional deconstruction unlike anything in corporate history. And we were just getting started. The fallout was instantaneous. Within 48 hours, Roberts Global's stock began to tremble. Not collapse. Tremble. A subtle vibration that spoke of something far more dangerous than a simple market correction. Michael's response was predictable. Aggressive. Desperate. Investigative teams were deployed. The most expensive corporate intelligence firms were brought in to uncover the origin of the mysterious merger proposal. They would find nothing. We ensured that. Our digital footprint was a ghost. Perfectly constructed. Deliberately elusive. David Chen became our primary point of vulnerability. The whispers we'd carefully planted began to grow. Rumors about technological stagnation. Questions about the firm's innovative capacity. I watched through our network of digital surveillance. Each movement calculated. Each response anticipated. Elena updated me continuously. Not with reports. With precision-crafted summaries that captured the essence of the unfolding strategy. "Chen's looking externally," she said during our next briefing. No additional context needed. We communicated in the language of pure strategy. The pressure points we'd identified were now active. Like precisely placed acupuncture needles in the corporate body of Roberts Global. Michael's initial confidence began to crack. Board meetings became war rooms. Defensive strategies replaced offensive moves. Exactly as we had designed. Our AI models ran continuous simulations. Thousands of potential scenarios calculated with mathematical precision. We weren't just responding. We were orchestrating. The International Banking Consortium monitoring their loan began to ask questions. Subtle inquiries. Carefully worded communications that suggested deeper concerns about the firm's stability. My children would be proud. This was strategy as an art form. A leaked internal communication found its way to key industry publications. Not through traditional channels. Through a network so complex it would take years to trace. The communication suggested internal discord. Technological limitations. Strategic misalignments. Michael's attempts to counteract the narrative only added fuel to the fire. Each press release. Each public statement. Each defensive maneuver created more questions than answers. David Chin was becoming increasingly isolated within the organization. The seeds of doubt we'd planted were taking root. I thought back to the reunion. Those 6 dismissive words. She's just a housewife. Each memory fueled my strategy but never clouded my judgment. Quantum Horizons predictive models showed multiple potential outcomes. We weren't just playing chess. We were playing 3-dimensional chess where the board itself was constantly changing. An anonymous white paper began circulating in tech innovation circles. Brilliant. Challenging. Subtly highlighting the technological gaps in Roberts Global's current approach. No direct connection could be traced. But its impact was devastating. Venture capital firms began to pull back. Not dramatically. Subtly. The kind of pullback that creates maximum psychological pressure. Michael's network of professional contacts started to change. Subtle shifts. Conversations becoming more guarded. Professional relationships becoming more transactional. We weren't just attacking a company. We were dismantling an entire professional ecosystem. My phone buzzed. A message from my daughter. Mom, your moves are incredible. He was learning. Understanding that true power is never announced. It's demonstrated. The financial markets continued their subtle dance. Roberts Global's stock didn't crash. It eroded. Slowly. Persistently. The kind of erosion that creates long-term structural damage. David Chin would be the first to break. Not through direct confrontation. Through a carefully constructed network of professional opportunities that would draw him away. Each move was a brushstroke. Each strategy a part of a larger masterpiece. Michael Roberts believed he understood the corporate world. He was about to receive a masterclass in true strategic transformation. The escalation was perfect. Precise. Unstoppable. And we were just getting started. The annual Tech Innovation Summit was Michael's last hope. A global conference where industry leaders showcase their strategic vision. Where reputations are built or destroyed in a single presentation. And where I would deliver the final blow. I arrived wearing a simple black blazer. No flashy accessories. No desperate attempts to command attention. True power doesn't announce itself. It simply exists. Michael didn't know I was there. Not yet. The conference hall buzzed with anticipation. Roberts Global was scheduled to present their revolutionary new strategic vision. A desperate attempt to recover from the systematic dismantling we'd engineered. David Chin would deliver the keynote. Our most strategically planted piece was about to move into its final position. As Michael's team took the stage, I watched from the back of the hall. Every detail of their body language. Every nuance of their presentation. Our AI had analyzed thousands of similar presentations. We knew exactly what was coming. David Chin began speaking. His slides were a masterpiece of corporate confusion. Buzzwords without substance. Strategic language that said everything and nothing. I caught Elena's eye across the room. A subtle nod. Everything was proceeding exactly as we had planned. The first crack appeared 15 minutes into the presentation. A subtle hesitation. A moment of uncertainty that would grow into a chasm. Michael watched from the side of the stage, his composure fracturing with each passing moment. Then I stepped forward. The room went silent. Quantum Horizon, I said. My voice carried across the conference hall. No microphone needed. Every head turned. Michael's face transformed. Recognition. But fear. The reunion felt like a lifetime ago. Just a housewife, they had said. I walked to the stage. Each step calculated. Each movement precise. Ladies and gentlemen, I continued, what you've just witnessed is the result of systemic professional incompetence. The conference hall became a battlefield. And I was about to deliver the final strike. I connected my device to the main presentation screen. Suddenly, the room filled with a comprehensive analysis of Roberts Global's fundamental failures. Not an attack. A surgical deconstruction. Financial projections. Technological limitations. Strategic missteps. Michael tried to interrupt. But this was no longer his stage. 10 years ago, I said, I was dismissed as just a housewife. Today, I'm the CEO who will demonstrate the true cost of underestimation. David Chin stood frozen. He knew. He had always known something was coming. The documents I presented weren't just a critique. They were a complete autopsy of Roberts Global's corporate structure. Our AI had been working for months. Every communication, every strategic move, analyzed, dissected, exposed. Michael's world was collapsing in real time. The International Banking Consortium was watching. Venture capitalists were taking notes. The tech industry was witnessing a public execution. This isn't just about a failed merger, I explained. This is about a fundamental misunderstanding of innovation, strategy, and professional respect. My children would be watching. Another lesson in strategic transformation. Michael tried to speak, but words failed him. The presentation continued. Each slide a nail in the coffin of his professional reputation. Technological gaps. Financial vulnerabilities. Strategic blind spots. No industry conference had ever seen anything like this. When I finished, the room was silent. David Chin approached me afterward. Not as an enemy. As someone who understood. You planned this, he said. Not a question. For a very long time, I responded. Michael stood in the background. Defeated. Broken. The reunion felt like a distant memory. Those 6 words, she's just a housewife, had created a tsunami of professional destruction. As I left the stage, I received a message from Elena. Our stock had jumped 12% in the last hour. Revenge was never about destruction. It was about transformation. And I had just transformed everything. The world moves differently after you've dismantled someone's entire professional existence. My office felt different in the weeks following the Tech Innovation Summit. Not larger. Not emptier. It's transformed. Media coverage was relentless. Tech Titan's stunning takedown, one headline read. The CEO who redefined corporate revenge, proclaimed another. But they understood nothing. This was never about revenge. Not truly. Elena sat across from me, a rare moment of quiet reflection. What now? She asked. The question hung in the air, pregnant with possibilities. My phone buzzed. A message from my daughter. Mom, Time magazine wants to do a feature on you. She included a laughing emoji. Our family understood strategy was an art form. Michael Roberts had disappeared from public view. His firm was being systematically dismantled by shareholders and venture capitalists who once celebrated his every move. The ecosystem we'd carefully constructed was now consuming itself. It was never personal, I told Elena. It was about challenging a system that reduces women to categories. Housewife, mother, secondary participant. The reunion felt like a distant memory. Those 6 words, she's just a housewife, had been the spark. But the fire was something much larger. Quantum Horizons stock continued to climb. Not through aggressive tactics. Through pure strategic innovation. David Chin had reached out. Not as an adversary, but as someone who recognized a fundamental shift in corporate dynamics. He was considering joining our team. My children understood something profound. Success isn't about loud declarations. It's about strategic patience. About understanding systems deeper than anyone else. The phone rang. My ex-husband. Quite a show you put on, he said. No judgment. No anger. Just recognition. Someone had to, I responded. The corporate world was changing. And we were leading that change. Interviews requested. Speaking engagements lined up. But those were secondary. The real work continued in our labs. In our strategic planning rooms. My daughter was developing her first AI model. Watching her, I saw a reflection of my own journey. Not just inheritance. Evolution. They'll write about this, Elena said. A statement. Not a question. Corporate histories are written by those who understand that power is never given. It's constructed. Carefully. Strategically. The media wanted a narrative of revenge. Of a woman scorned. They missed the entire point. This was about dismantling systems that limit potential. About demonstrating that innovation knows no gender. No predetermined category. My phone showed messages from women across industries. Not just congratulations, but recognition. Understanding. You gave us a blueprint, one message read. Another. This is what breaking glass ceilings looks like. Michael Roberts had become a cautionary tale. Not because of what we did, but because of what he represented. The reunion felt like a lifetime ago. Those dismissive words had awakened something far larger than personal retribution. A movement. Elena was preparing our next strategic initiative. Something that would make the Roberts global takedown look like a preliminary exercise. My children watched. Bernie. Understanding that strategy is a language. That intelligence has no gender. The corporate world would never be the same. And we were just getting started. A text from my daughter. Ready for the next challenge, Mom? I looked at Elena. She understood immediately. Always, I responded. The game continues. 5 years had passed since the Tech Innovation Summit. The world looked different. Not just because of what I had done, but because of what we had started. Quantum Horizon had become more than a company. It was a movement. A reimagining of corporate potential. My daughter stood beside me during the annual innovation conference. No longer a child watching. Now a partner. Her first AI model had just revolutionized predictive healthcare analytics. Full circle, she whispered. The reunion felt like a distant memory. Those 6 words, she's just a housewife, had transformed into a global conversation about potential. About limitations. About breaking through. Michael Roberts? A footnote in corporate history. Our foundation now funded technological education for women across continents. Not charity. Strategic investment in human potential. Elena had become more than a CEO. She was the architect of our broader vision. Each initiative a carefully constructed intervention in systems that had long marginalized potential. The phone rang. Davidson. Now not just an ally but a key strategic partner. The new education initiative, he said. It's changing everything. And it was. We weren't just building a company. We were reconstructing opportunity. My ex-husband called. Proud. Not of my revenge. But of the systemic change we'd catalyzed. You did more than win, he said. You redesigned the game. My children understood something profound. Success isn't about individual triumph. It's about creating pathways for others. The media had long moved past the narrative of revenge. Now they spoke of transformation. Of systemic change. The woman who rewrote corporate rules. One headline read. But we knew the truth. This was never about rules. It was about potential. Our AI models were now predictive engines of social change. Not just identifying market trends, but understanding human potential before it was recognized. The foundation we'd built was our real legacy. Technology scholarships, mentorship programs, strategic interventions in educational systems. We're not just changing industries, I told my daughter. We're changing how potential is recognized. He understood. Completely. Michael Roberts had become a case study. Not of defeat, but of what happens when potential is systematically underestimated. Our next project would transform educational technology, identifying potential in students long before traditional systems could recognize it. Elena entered with our latest strategic proposal. Not a document. A blueprint for human potential. The reunion felt like a lifetime ago. Those 6 dismissive words had become a global conversation about capability. About recognition. Ready? My daughter asked. I looked at the team. At Elena. At the room full of brilliant minds we'd assembled. Always, I responded. The world was still full of systems waiting to be redesigned. Of potential waiting to be unleashed. And we were just getting started. A text from a scholarship recipient. A young woman who developed a breakthrough in renewable energy technology. Thank you, the message read. For showing us what's possible. This was never about revenge. This was about transformation. And transformation is a continuous journey. My husband is in Paris with his lover while I'm at our daughter's wedding. He texted, stuck at a conference, can't make it. What he doesn't know is, I'm the one who paid for his trip. and the private investigator sending me photos of his conference. Tomorrow his world crumbles. The blue glow of my laptop illuminated the darkness of our home office at 2:17 a.m. I hadn't planned to be awake, but wedding jitters, not for myself but for my daughter, had jolted me from sleep. I decided to tackle Emma's wedding budget spreadsheet, hoping the mundane task would lull me back to drowsiness. That's when I saw it. An email notification flickered across my screen. Thank you for your reservation at Le Grand Paris. The confirmation wasn't addressed to me but to Dylan, my husband of 27 years. The same Dylan who had texted me hours earlier about the terrible Boston weather delaying his technology conference registration. I blinked, certain I was misreading something in my sleep-deprived state. The email showed a 5-night stay in a luxury suite, spanning our daughter's entire wedding weekend. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as a chill crawled up my spine. 27 years of marriage had taught me to trust my instincts, and something was terribly wrong. It must be spam, I whispered to myself, but the reservation details were too specific. I clicked through to our shared cloud storage where we kept travel documents. There it was, a folder labeled Boston Conference containing a flight itinerary. Not to Boston but to Paris. Before we begin, I want to welcome you to a story about betrayal, resilience, and reclamation. If you've ever felt underestimated or overlooked, Sydney's journey from silent partner to powerful CEO will resonate deeply. Consider subscribing. It's completely free and ensures you never miss these stories of transformation and empowerment. Now let's witness how one discovery can change everything. The house felt suddenly airless. I opened the window, letting the cool night breeze wash over me as I struggled to make sense of this discovery. Why would Dylan lie about where he was going? And more troublingly, how could he plan to miss Emma's wedding? Our only daughter, whose hand he'd promised to walk down the aisle in just 5 days. Sleep forgotten, I dove deeper. If Dylan had lied about this trip, what else might he be hiding? The question led me to our company's financial records, something I hadn't scrutinized in months. As co-founder of Montgomery Advanced Systems, I'd stepped back from daily operations to coordinate Emma's wedding, trusting Dylan to handle things temporarily. That trust evaporated as spreadsheet after spreadsheet revealed alarming discrepancies. 6 transfers totaling $3.7 million had gone to an offshore entity called Horizon Holdings in the past month alone. I'd never heard of this company, yet there was Dylan's electronic signature authorizing each transaction. My hands trembled as reality sank in. These weren't simple accounting errors. This was deliberate concealment. My phone rang, startling me so badly I knocked over my cold tea. Frank Winters's name flashed on the screen. Our accountant calling at 3 in the morning could only mean one thing: disaster. Sydney, I'm sorry to call so late. His voice sounded thin, weaker than when I'd last seen him. The cancer treatments were taking their toll. Frank, are you all right? No, not really. A painful cough interrupted him. But that's not why I'm calling. There's something you need to know and I can't keep it from you any longer. My stomach knotted as Frank explained how Dylan had approached him weeks ago with documents for a company sale, to French investors. Our company. My company. The one I'd helped build from nothing while raising our daughter, the one that bore my family name. He told me you'd agreed to it but wanted to stay out of the negotiations, Frank continued, each word driving the betrayal deeper. I believed him until I saw the terms. They're carving out your shares, Sydney. He's selling it out from under you. After Frank's call, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, a cold clarity washed over me. I spent the remainder of the night methodically taking screenshots, downloading financial records, and creating an encrypted folder that documented every aspect of Dylan's deception. By sunrise, my shock had hardened into resolve. I maintained perfect composure through breakfast with Emma, who stopped by to discuss wedding flowers. I smiled and nodded appropriately while my mind calculated my next moves. When she mentioned her father's video call from Boston later that day, I suggested making it a surprise for him. I'd set up the call myself as a special moment between them. After Emma left, I made a call of my own to Diane Chin. We'd met at a women's business leadership conference years ago, but I'd kept her card not for her corporate security expertise, but because she'd mentioned her background in military intelligence. I need surveillance in Paris, I told her without preamble. Discreet, immediate, and thorough. Diane didn't ask unnecessary questions. Send me what you have. I'll have someone on it within hours. For the next 3 days I lived a double life. To everyone around me, I was the joyful mother of the bride handling last-minute wedding details with grace. In private moments I was building a case against my husband, reviewing Diane's operatives' findings, and securing digital evidence before Dylan could discover what I knew. I intercepted his fake texts about Boston weather delays and conference sessions, responding with concerned questions about when he might make it back for the wedding. Each lie he sent strengthened my resolve. This man, who had shared my bed, my business, and my life, was planning to strip me of everything while missing our daughter's most important day. The evening before the rehearsal dinner, as I finalized seating arrangements in our dining room, Diane's latest update arrived. The photos appeared one by one on my secure tablet. Dylan emerging from the Parisian hotel in a suit I'd never seen. Dylan at a cafe with 3 men in tailored suits, papers spread between them. And then the images that stole my breath. Dylan with a woman. Tall, elegantly dressed, her hand lingering on his arm as they entered a restaurant. More photos followed, leaving no doubt their relationship went far beyond business. A quick search identified her as Vivienne Laurent, corporate attorney specializing in international acquisitions. Her professional biography mentioned her work facilitating seamless company transitions between European and American owners. I zoomed in on one photo, studying the woman who represented yet another layer of my husband's betrayal. She was beautiful, yes, but it wasn't jealousy that flooded me. It was a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't just about an affair or embezzlement. This was calculated destruction of everything we'd built together. I closed the tablet and walked to our bedroom window, gazing out at the garden where Emma's wedding would take place in 4 days. 27 years of marriage, 25 years building our company, and 24 years raising our daughter. All of it now shadowed by lies. But as I watched the sunset paint our garden in gold, something unexpected bloomed inside me. Not despair, but determination. Dylan believed I was safely distracted by wedding preparations while he dismantled our life. He had no idea that his silent partner was no longer silent. Tomorrow, Emma's rehearsal dinner would proceed perfectly. I would toast to love and loyalty while secretly continuing to build my case. And when Dylan finally returned, believing his plan executed flawlessly, he would discover that I had designed a plan of my own. One that would save our company, protect our daughter, and show him precisely who he had underestimated all these years. I picked up my phone and texted him back, "We all miss you terribly. Emma's going to be so beautiful. I wish you could be here sooner." I added a heart emoji and pressed send, smiling for the first time all day. Let him think I was still in the dark. The light I was bringing would be blinding enough when the time came. Morning light filtered through the ivory curtains of Emma's childhood bedroom as I pinned the last pearl into her intricate updo. Outside, wedding vendors bustled across our property, transforming the garden into the fairy tale setting my daughter had dreamed of since she was small. "Mom, my hands won't stop shaking," Emma whispered, her reflection meeting mine in the antique vanity mirror we'd refinished together when she was 16. I squeezed her shoulders gently. "That's just all the love in you trying to escape," I said, the tenderness in my voice genuine despite the storm raging inside me. My phone buzzed on the dresser. Another message from Dylan. I checked it while pretending to adjust Emma's veil. Asterisk flight delayed again. Boston airport chaos. Don't think I'll make the ceremony. Have someone record it. So sorry. Asterisk. The practiced lie made bile rise in my throat. I'd received Diane's morning update an hour earlier. A photo of Dylan having breakfast at his Paris hotel, the newspaper on his table clearly showing today's date. In the background, the unmistakable silhouette of Vivienne Laurent waiting by the door. "Dad just texted," I told Emma, keeping my voice steady. "His connection's delayed, but he's trying everything possible to get here in time." Emma's face fell momentarily before she squared her shoulders. "At least we'll have the video call for the dance." "That was genius, Mom." "Yes," I said, kissing her forehead. "Technology can be such a blessing sometimes." Between final makeup touches and the bridesmaid's champagne toast, I slipped into my study to upload another batch of financial documents to my secure cloud. My fingers worked rapidly, tagging files that showed Dylan's systematic dismantling of our company's ownership structure. 3 board members had already confirmed their discreet attendance at tonight's reception. All of them old friends who'd invested in our startup decades ago. People Dylan believed would support any decision he made. He'd soon discover how wrong he was. A crisis with the flower arrangements pulled me back to wedding duties. Through it all, the photographer's arrival, the guests gathering in the garden, the string quartet beginning their prelude, I maintained the facade of the overjoyed mother. No one could see the warrior beneath, methodically executing a plan while my daughter celebrated the beginning of her marriage as mine crumbled in secret. "Sydney." My sister Claire rushed toward me, panic in her eyes. The officiant called. His car broke down on the highway. For a moment, wedding chaos provided welcome distraction from my private battle. I calmed Claire, called our family attorney who was a licensed marriage officiant, and resolved the crisis without Emma ever knowing there had been one. Crisis management had always been my specialty, a skill that would serve me well in the days to come. The ceremony passed in a blur of beauty and emotions that were no less real for the deception happening in parallel. My tears watching Emma walk down the aisle on our longtime friend Michael's arm, a last-minute stand-in for her delayed father, were genuine. My daughter deserved this perfect day, and nothing, not even her father's betrayal, would taint it. The reception began as sunset painted the sky in hues of amber and rose. I'd scheduled Dylan's surprise video call during what would have been the father-daughter dance. Emma stood in the center of the dance floor, radiant in her gown as I positioned my tablet at just the right angle. When Dylan's face appeared on the screen, the garden fell silent. Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Daddy, I wish you were here," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I'm there in spirit, princess," Dylan replied, his performance flawless. "Dance with me anyway?" As the music began and Emma swayed with the tablet in her arms, I circled them slowly, my phone camera recording what appeared to be a touching moment. But I wasn't capturing the dance. I was documenting the Eiffel Tower clearly visible through Dylan's hotel window, a landmark impossible to see from any Boston location. Throughout the reception, I wove between celebrations and conspiracies with practiced grace. While Emma cut the cake, I slipped away to meet with James Hamilton, our first investor and current board chair. "These documents are legitimate?" he asked, his face grim as he scrolled through my evidence in a quiet corner of the house. "Every file," I confirmed. "Dylan's selling 25 years of our work without authorization or board approval. The deal closes Monday." "Not anymore, it doesn't," James replied, his loyalty to me rather than Dylan instantly clear. "I'll speak with the others tonight." Discreetly. My moment came during the traditional speeches. Standing before our gathered loved ones, champagne flute in hand, I delivered words that moved the crowd to tears. "Marriage, like any worthwhile venture, thrives on equal partnership," I began, looking directly at Emma and her new husband. "It requires transparency, honesty, and the courage to face difficult truths together." My speech wove memories of Emma's childhood with wisdom about lasting relationships. But beneath the touching anecdotes lay carefully crafted phrases that only Dylan would understand. References to our early business struggles, the promises we'd made when founding Montgomery Advanced Systems, coded warnings in the language of our shared history. "Remember, darling," I said, raising my glass to Emma though my words were aimed elsewhere, "the strongest foundations are built on truth. Without it, even the most beautiful structures eventually collapse." As dancing resumed and the celebration reached its peak, I retreated to my makeshift command center in the pool house. Here, with one eye on security cameras showing the jubilant reception, I completed my most critical task. My fingers flew across the keyboard, transferring proprietary algorithms and encryption keys to servers that required my personal authentication. Systems Dylan had forgotten existed from our company's early days. "Mrs. Montgomery?" Diane Chen's voice came through my earpiece. "The target is preparing to leave his Paris location. Looks like he's headed to the airport." "Perfect timing," I replied, initiating the final protocol that would lock Dylan out of our most valuable intellectual property. "He'll be landing to quite a surprise." The screen confirmed my transfer complete just as fireworks exploded overhead, celebrating Emma's marriage. The synchronicity wasn't lost on me, light and color blazing through darkness, marking endings and beginnings. I rejoined the party, accepting congratulations and hugging my radiant daughter as she prepared to leave for her honeymoon. No one saw the steel beneath my smile, the the calculated precision with which I'd executed both a perfect wedding and the first phase of Dylan's reckoning. Emma hugged me fiercely before departing. "Thank you for making today perfect, Mom. I just wish Dad could have been here." "He made his choices, sweetheart," I said softly, the double meaning hidden in plain sight. "But don't worry. I'll make sure he understands exactly what he missed today." As their car disappeared down the driveway, guests waving sparklers in farewell, I checked my watch. Dylan would be boarding his flight home soon, believing he was returning to a wife distracted by wedding afterglow and unaware of his betrayal. He had no idea what awaited him, or that today's celebration marked not just my daughter's new beginning but mine as well. The house fell silent in the aftermath of the wedding. The caterers had cleared away the last champagne flutes, the rented chairs were stacked and gone, and even the fairy lights had been unplugged, leaving only the memory of celebration hanging in the air. I hadn't slept, but exhaustion was a luxury I couldn't afford. At 7:30 a.m. I heard a car pull into the driveway. Margot Finch, Emma's former college roommate and now head of cybersecurity at a Silicon Valley firm, arrived precisely on time, looking fresh despite the early hour. "Thanks for coming on such short notice," I said, leading her to our home office. "I know it's the day after the wedding, but with Dylan away and the office quiet, it seemed perfect for the system updates we've been putting off." Margot set her laptop bag down and eyed the coffee I'd prepared. "Mrs. Montgomery, you just pulled off the wedding of the century. I should be thanking you for the consulting gig. Besides, Emma would kill me if I didn't help her mom. If only she knew the real reason I'd called her." As Margot began her work, I watched her fingers fly across the keyboard, systematically reviewing our company's security architecture. She believed she was performing routine maintenance, strengthening firewalls, updating authentication protocols, patching potential vulnerabilities. In reality, she was building my fortress. "Your current security is actually pretty robust," she noted, "but these new protocols will require multi-factor authentication for any major system changes or data transfers. No one, not even Dylan, will be able to make significant alterations without your approval." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. Better safe than sorry in today's digital landscape. While Margot worked, I retreated to the kitchen table with my laptop, drafting a series of emails to our most valuable clients. Each message appeared innocent. Updates on current projects, inquiries about satisfaction levels, subtle mentions of our company's long-term stability plans. Between the lines, however, I planted carefully worded phrases. "As we continue our commitment to remain a privately held American company, our dedication to maintaining current leadership and vision remains unwavering. While the market buzzes with acquisition rumors, we remain focused on organic growth." By noon, I'd sent 17 tailored messages to clients who collectively represented 73% of our annual revenue. The responses began arriving almost immediately: concern, confusion, requests for clarification about rumors they'd heard. Each reply confirmed what I suspected. Dylan had already begun preparing our client base for the ownership transition without my knowledge. "All done in here," Margot called from the office. "Want me to walk you through the changes?" I joined her for a thorough briefing, memorizing the new security protocols that would soon become my armor. After she left, promising to send her invoice to our accounting department, I turned my attention to our personal finances. The discovery hit harder than I expected. Our joint accounts showed steady withdrawals over the past 8 months. Nothing large enough to trigger my attention during my distraction with wedding planning, but substantial in aggregate. Following the digital trail led me to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, Singapore and Switzerland. Dylan had meticulously constructed a financial escape route, transferring nearly 60% of our personal wealth to accounts under his sole control. I leaned back in my chair, a curious calm washing over me. This wasn't just business betrayal or infidelity. This was calculated abandonment, the dismantling of our entire shared life. My phone rang, displaying an international number I didn't recognize. "Sydney Montgomery," I answered, my voice steady despite the hurricane of emotions within. "Mrs. Montgomery, this is Marcel Laurent." The French accent was thick, the voice tense. "You don't know me, but I believe we have a mutual situation." My breath caught. "Laurent. As in Vivian Laurent. My estranged wife, yes. I understand she's been spending time with your husband in Paris." I moved to the window, scanning the empty driveway out of habit. How did you get my number, Mr. Laurent? I'm a financial journalist. Finding information is what I do. He paused. And I have information you might find valuable. Marcel explained that he'd been tracking Vivian's activities since their separation 6 months ago. She had a pattern, he said, targeting married executives involved in major acquisitions, positioning herself as both legal counsel and romantic interest. The relationships inevitably collapsed after deals closed, but not before she secured substantial consultation fees and personal gifts that somehow evaded tax scrutiny. I can send you everything I've documented, Marcel offered. Bank transfers, hotel records, text message transcripts from our shared cloud account she forgot to remove me from. Consider it a professional courtesy from one betrayed spouse to another. Why help me? I asked, suspicion threading through my gratitude. What do you gain? His bitter laugh carried across the Atlantic. Let's just say I've learned that revenge is a dish best served with documented evidence and public exposure. Your husband isn't her first, but perhaps you can ensure he's her last. After our call ended, Marcel's files began arriving in my encrypted email, damning evidence of the playbook Vivian had executed 3 times before with other executives. The final piece of my puzzle slid into place. I spent the afternoon in calculated productivity, scheduling an emergency company-wide meeting for 9 a.m. Monday, precisely 2 hours after Dylan's flight was scheduled to land. The official agenda cited urgent quarterly projections review and strategic planning, but my true purpose remained hidden behind corporate jargon. By evening, I'd received confirmation from 6 board members who would attend in person rather than via conference call. An unusual response that Dylan would have noticed had he not been 3,500 miles away, distracted by Vivian and his imagined triumph. As darkness fell, I methodically prepared our home for Dylan's return. I moved his personal items from our bedroom to the guest room. I printed selected photographs from Diane's surveillance and placed them in a folder on his desk. I changed the access codes to our home security system, programming in a temporary code that would allow him entry just once. The final touch was a call to our executive assistant, Patricia, who had been with us since the company's founding. Patricia, it's Sydney. I have a delicate matter to discuss. Her loyalty had never been in question. She was the first person I'd hired when we expanded beyond our garage startup, and the only staff member who had a company ownership stake besides Dylan and myself. The rumors are true, I told her. Dylan has been attempting to sell the company without board approval or my consent. I need your help tomorrow. Patricia's gasp was followed by steely determination. Just tell me what you need, Sydney. We spent an hour coordinating tomorrow's meeting logistics. Who would be seated where, which documents would be distributed, how security would handle access to the executive floor. Patricia had always excelled at battlefield strategy disguised as administrative efficiency. As midnight approached, I stood in our garden where just 24 hours earlier, Emma had danced surrounded by love and celebration. How quickly life could transform. Wedding flowers still fragrant in vases throughout the house while I prepared for corporate warfare. My phone buzzed with a text from Dylan. Landing tomorrow 7:05 a.m. Can't wait to see you and hear about the wedding. Love you. The casual deception, the easy endearment, they should have hurt. Instead they crystallized my resolve. I typed back a response that would give him no reason for suspicion. Safe travels. We have lots to catch up on. I looked up at the stars, drawing strength from their distant light. Tomorrow Dylan would return to the life he thought he controlled, to the wife he believed he had deceived. He had no idea he was walking into a reckoning of my design. I was no longer just Sydney Montgomery, the silent partner. I had become the architect of accountability, and my blueprint was flawless. Dawn broke with the time of my phone. A notification from the flight tracking app. Dylan's plane had landed 10 minutes early. I'd been awake for hours already, methodically transforming our home for his return. The space that had witnessed 27 years of our marriage was now unrecognizable. In our home office, I removed the last family photo from the wall. Emma's college graduation, the 3 of us beaming with genuine pride. I carefully placed it in a box with the others, then hung in its place an enlarged image of Dylan entering the Paris hotel with Vivian, her hand resting possessively on his arm. Beside it went financial statements highlighting the unauthorized transfers, each one bearing his digital signature. The formal notice from the board, drafted overnight and signed by 6 members, took center place above his desk, its legal language stark and unambiguous. The sale was blocked. My phone rang. "He's in a taxi," Diane reported. "20 minutes from your location." "And our other targets?" "The French investment team checked into the Grand Metropolitan 30 minutes ago. They're expecting to meet with Dylan at 11. I checked my watch. I'll be there in 15 minutes. I surveyed my transformation of the house one final time. Every room contained strategically placed evidence, documentation of his betrayal placed where he couldn't miss it, yet arranged with an almost artistic precision. This wasn't just confrontation. It was installation art with a purpose. The drive downtown felt surreal. Morning commuters surrounded me, unaware of the corporate coup taking place in their midst. I parked at the Grand Metropolitan and asked for Jean-Claude Moreau at the front desk, using the name Diane had confirmed as the lead investor. Mrs. Montgomery, the silver-haired Frenchman, greeted me in the hotel's conference room, his momentary confusion quickly masked by professional courtesy. "We were expecting your husband." "I'm sure you were," I replied, placing my portfolio on the table. "But as co-founder and equal owner of Montgomery Advanced Systems, I believe I'm better positioned to discuss its future." His colleagues exchanged glances as I removed the first document, my marriage certificate, followed by our company's founding papers showing my 50% ownership. "Gentlemen, I'll be direct. My husband has attempted to sell you something he doesn't fully own, without board approval or my consent. That alone voids any potential agreement." I slid forward a copy of the board's notice. "But there's more you should know before your company invests €230 million in what would ultimately be an invalid transaction." For 20 minutes, I methodically outlined the technological vulnerabilities Dylan had concealed during their due diligence, security flaws in our newest platform that would require millions to correct, patent challenges on 2 key components, and regulatory hurdles he deliberately minimized. "We were not made aware of these issues," Moreau said tightly, signaling to his team to take notes. "Nor were you made aware of this," I added, sliding forward Marcel Laurent's dossier on Vivian and her pattern of compromising acquisition deals. "Your legal representative has a concerning history." The mood in the room shifted palpably. These weren't just businessmen. They were investors with reputations at stake. By the time I stood to leave 30 minutes later, they were already on phones with their legal department in Paris. "Mrs. Montgomery," Moreau called as I reached the door. "What exactly do you want?" I turned, meeting his gaze directly. "I want what's mine, Mr. Moreau. Nothing more, nothing less." As my car pulled away from the hotel, I made the call I'd been planning for days. "Patricia, execute the press release now." At precisely 9:47 a.m. as Dylan's taxi turned onto our street, the announcement hit the business wires. Montgomery Advanced Systems announces leadership restructuring. Co-founder Sidney Montgomery assumes CEO role. I watched from the window as Dylan's phone must have erupted with notifications. He visibly stiffened in the back seat of the taxi, his head bowed over the screen. I could almost see the frantic scrolling, the dawning realization that his carefully constructed plans were collapsing in real time. His first call came before he even reached the front door. I watched on my tablet as he tried to access his executive email, only to receive the automatic notification that his credentials had been temporarily suspended pending security review. His second call went to the CFO who, as instructed, directed him to the emergency board meeting already in progress. His third call went to Vivian. That one I couldn't track, but his expression as he ended it told me everything I needed to know. I positioned myself in the living room, seated calmly on the sofa with contract documents spread before me. The sound of his key in the lock echoed through the house, followed by the security system's automated voice. "One-time access code accepted." Dylan stepped into the foyer, his designer luggage abandoned just inside the door as he took in the transformed space. His eyes darted from the surveillance photos lining the entryway to the financial statements mounted on the living room walls. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, his voice hoarse with shock. I looked up as if just noticing his arrival. "Welcome home, Dylan. How was Paris?" The calmness in my voice surprised even me. "Sydney, whatever you think is happening, isn't happening." I finished for him. "The unauthorized sale of our company? Your affair with Vivian Laurent? Your systematic transfer of our personal assets to offshore accounts. I gestured to the evidence surrounding us. It's all quite thoroughly documented. The board has been briefed. The French investors have withdrawn. And as of 10 minutes ago, the tech press is reporting on the company's leadership restructuring. Dylan's face cycled through emotions: shock, anger, calculation, and finally, the beginning of a desperate charm offensive I knew all too well. "Sid, baby, you don't understand the pressure I've been under." He moved toward me, hands spread in supplication. "The market is changing. The company needed this deal to survive. I was protecting our future." "By missing our daughter's wedding?" I asked quietly. "By transferring millions to accounts I couldn't access? By sleeping with the attorney negotiating against us?" His expression hardened. "You've been so wrapped up in Emma's wedding you haven't seen what's happening in our industry. We're falling behind. This acquisition was our golden parachute. Our company has record profits this quarter," I countered, sliding forward the financial reports he thought I hadn't seen. "The acquisition wasn't a lifeboat. It was your exit strategy. At my expense." Dylan's composure cracked. "You've always been holding me back. Playing the dutiful wife while secretly undermining my vision. The company could be twice what it is if you hadn't insisted on your cautious approach. And yet that cautious approach built the security protocols that just locked you out of your own systems," I noted, rising to face him directly. "This isn't just about us, Dylan. It's about Emma's inheritance, the legacy we promised to build for her. It's about the 312 employees whose livelihoods you were gambling with." His eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape, an angle, a strategy. Finding none, his desperation turned to rage. "You won't get away with this. The board has seen everything," I interrupted, my voice quiet but firm. "The offshore accounts, the falsified projections, the manipulated client contracts, your signature on papers you never showed me." I stepped closer, meeting his gaze. "You taught me something important over these 27 years, Dylan. You taught me to always read the fine print. And the fine print in our company bylaws states that fraud by any officer triggers an automatic leadership review." Dylan's phone buzzed with incoming calls that he ignored, his face pale as the full extent of his situation dawned on him. "I trusted you," I said softly. "With my heart, my company, our daughter's future. You weren't just betraying a business partner. You were dismantling our entire shared life." For the first time, I saw something genuine in his eyes. Not remorse for his actions, but shock at being caught, at being outmaneuvered by the woman he had so completely underestimated. "What happens now?" he finally asked, his voice barely audible. I glanced at my watch. "Now we have a board meeting to attend. After that." I met his eyes one final time. "That depends entirely on how much more of our shared legacy you're willing to destroy." The Montgomery Advanced Systems boardroom had always intimidated visitors with its wall of windows overlooking the city skyline, the gleaming mahogany table that seated 16, and the subtle display of industry awards accumulated over 25 years. Today it felt like a courtroom. 8 board members sat ramrods straight, their expressions ranging from shock to barely concealed anger as I methodically presented the evidence projected on the wall screen. Dylan sat opposite me, his earlier bluster deflated with each damning slide. "As you can see from these communications," I continued, advancing to an email thread between Dylan and Vivian, "the planned sale was deliberately concealed from both the board and myself despite our fiduciary requirement for dual executive approval on any ownership changes." James Hamilton, our longest-serving board member, removed his glasses slowly. "Dylan, is there anything you'd like to say in response to these allegations?" Dylan leaned forward, his charm offensive switched to full power. "This is being wildly mischaracterized. Sydney found preliminary discussions and jumped to conclusions. Yes, I explored options without immediate disclosure, but only to gauge market interest before bringing a fully formed proposal to the board. Preliminary discussions don't typically include signed letters of intent," I countered, displaying the document bearing his signature, "or transfers of proprietary algorithms to third parties for evaluation purposes." The room fell silent as board members reviewed copies of the technical schematics Dylan had shared with the French investors, core intellectual property that represented millions in development costs. "This constitutes corporate espionage," said Victoria Reeves, our newest board member and former federal prosecutor. These actions expose the company to significant liability. For 2 more hours, the meeting continued in this vein. My meticulous evidence met with Dylan's increasingly desperate explanations. When the board finally called for a brief recess, Dylan cornered me near the water cooler, his voice low, urgent. "Sydney, we can fix this. Together." His hand reached for mine, the same practiced gesture he'd used countless times throughout our marriage. "We built this company from nothing. We can rebuild our marriage too." I stepped back, creating distance. "I already have the company, Dylan. And I have no interest in rebuilding something that existed only in my imagination." When the board reconvened, their decision was unanimous. Dylan would be removed as CEO effective immediately. I would assume full executive control while the company navigated this transition. As the boardroom emptied, I remained seated, arranging papers with deliberate calm while Dylan stood frozen by the doorway. "You'll be hearing from my attorneys," he finally said, a hollow threat we both recognized. "Actually, you'll be hearing from mine first." I slid a manila envelope across the polished table. "Divorce papers. Already filed." Dylan stared at the envelope without touching it. "You'll note that the terms are more than fair," I continued. "You retain your original founder's shares, though you're removed from operations. You keep the vacation house in Aspen. Your retirement accounts remain untouched." I met his eyes. "A more generous settlement than you had planned for me. Why would you do that?" Suspicion colored his voice. "Not for you," I clarified. "For Emma. Because despite everything, she loves her father, and I won't make her choose sides in a scorched earth divorce. You've already taken enough from her by missing her wedding. I won't take her father too." 3 days later, Emma's honeymoon ended with her return to a family transformed. I waited until she and her husband were settled in their new apartment before I asked her to meet me for lunch alone. The upscale cafe provided enough privacy for difficult conversations. Emma's eyes, so like her father's, searched my face as I carefully explained what had happened. The planned company sale, the financial deceptions, the real reason Dylan had missed her wedding. "So he was in Paris? With another woman?" Her voice cracked slightly on the last words. "Yes," I answered simply, respecting her enough to offer truth without embellishment. Emma stared into her untouched tea. "And you're getting divorced?" "We are." Her shoulders straightened, a gesture so reminiscent of my own that it caught me off guard. "I need to talk to Dad. Hear his side." "I would expect nothing less," I said, reaching for her hand. "And whatever relationship you choose to have with him moving forward is yours to define. I won't interfere." 2 weeks after Dylan moved out, I called the first all-company meeting under my leadership. 400 employees gathered in the main atrium, uncertainty evident in their postures and whispered conversations. "Many of you have heard rumors," I began, my voice carrying through the space. "Some true, some exaggerated. Today, I want to speak directly about our path forward." For the next hour, I outlined my vision for the company's future. A restructuring that emphasized innovation, collaboration, and recognition of overlooked talent. Patricia, my loyal assistant, was promoted to chief of staff. Mark Chin, a brilliant engineer whose ideas had been repeatedly sidelined under Dylan's leadership, was appointed head of our new advanced research division. This company was built on the principle that the best ideas can come from anywhere, I told them. We're returning to that foundation while building something stronger, more transparent, and more inclusive. In the weeks that followed, I worked 18-hour days reimagining the company culture. I replaced the executive boardroom's imposing table with a circular design that eliminated hierarchical seating. I instituted a bi-weekly innovation forum where employees from any department could pitch concepts directly to leadership. I reviewed salaries across departments, correcting imbalances that had disadvantaged primarily female employees. The work provided purpose through the painful aftermath of betrayal. Each night I returned to a home stripped of Dylan's presence, where I was slowly reclaiming spaces that had once been ours and making them distinctly mine. The master bedroom became a sanctuary of blues and grays rather than Dylan's preferred earth tones. The home office transformed into a creative studio where I could sketch product designs like I had in the company's early days. Emma visited weekly, navigating her new relationship with both parents with a grace that made my heart ache with pride. She maintained contact with her father but made her disappointment clear. "He's trying to explain it all away," she told me over dinner one evening. "But I keep thinking about that video call during the wedding, seeing the Eiffel Tower in his window while he pretended to be in Boston." "People make mistakes," I said carefully. "Even terrible ones." She studied me with those perceptive eyes. "How are you not furious all the time?" "Who says I'm not?" I smiled slightly. But anger wouldn't restore what was taken. Only I could do that. 6 months after that fateful wedding weekend, Montgomery Advanced Systems celebrated its 25th anniversary. Under crystal chandeliers in the Grand Metropolitan Ballroom, the same hotel where I'd confronted the French investors, hundreds of employees, clients, and industry leaders gathered to mark the occasion. I stood at the podium wearing a silk dress in our company's signature blue, a delicate Parisian scarf draped around my shoulders, purchased during my first solo international business trip the previous month, where I'd secured our largest European contract to date. 25 years ago, a company was born in a garage with nothing but ambition and a belief in making technology more accessible. I began looking out at the sea of faces. Today, we honor that legacy while embracing a future limited only by our imagination and courage. As champagne glasses raised in toast, I caught sight of my reflection in the ballroom's mirrored wall, no longer the silent partner, no longer defined by my marriage, but standing firmly in my reclaimed identity. Sydney Montgomery, architect of her own rebirth. My husband's family always looked down on me, calling me unworthy. He agreed and pulled away. 7 years later, I ran into him at a business gala. He didn't recognize me. I smiled and handed him a contract he never expected. My company had just bought his family's business. Silence followed. I slammed the folder on our kitchen counter so hard that Jason's coffee mug toppled over, black liquid spreading across his pristine white shirt. "What the hell is this?" My voice shook, finger jabbing at the damning evidence. "A background check? Me? Like I'm some kind of criminal?" Jason's face drained of color as he recognized the manila folder labeled Claire Thompson, background, in his mother's unmistakable handwriting. The private investigators' report his family had commissioned revealed everything. My parents' modest income, my student loans, even photos of the small house where I grew up. Each page was marked with Vivian Wright's elegant script: unsuitable, common, lacking refinement. "Claire, I can explain." Jason reached for my hand but I stepped back, the betrayal still fresh, still burning. "Did you know about this? Before you proposed to me?" The tears threatened to fall, but I refused to give them the satisfaction. That moment was my first glimpse behind the Wright family facade. I just didn't know it was only the beginning. I had met Jason Wright at a charity fundraiser where I was working as an event coordinator. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in my ideas about sustainable business practices. When he proposed 6 months later, I believed I'd found my partner, my equal. The diamond ring on my finger blinded me to the warning signs. The slight hesitation when he introduced me to his mother, the appraising looks from his father, the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. 3 weeks before discovering the folder, Jason's mother Vivian had called me to discuss the engagement party. "Nothing fancy," she had promised with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just immediate family and a few close friends." The Wright estate sprawled across 5 acres of manicured lawns and gardens. Valets in crisp uniforms parked guests' luxury cars while waitstaff circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. This was Vivian's idea of nothing fancy. 200 of Boston's elite mingling beneath crystal chandeliers. Jason disappeared within minutes of our arrival, pulled away by his father to meet an old friend, who happened to be the governor. I stood alone, clutching my purse like a shield when an older server approached. "Miss Thompson? Mrs. Wright asked me to show you to your seat for dinner." He led me past the grand dining room where tables were being set with fine china and silver, through a swinging door, and into a smaller room where staff were preparing trays. "There must be some mistake," I said, staring at the single place setting wedged between stacks of extra napkins and water pitchers. The server's eyes flashed with pity. "Mrs. Wright was very specific. She said you'd be more comfortable here, observing how proper service is conducted." My cheeks burned with humiliation as I heard laughter from the main room. 20 minutes later, Jason found me still standing there, paralyzed with shock. "Claire, What are you doing back here? Everyone's seated. His genuine confusion made me wonder if he truly didn't know what his mother had done, or if he was simply a better actor than I'd given him credit for. When he led me to the main table, Vivian's smile never faltered. Oh dear, there seems to have been a misunderstanding with the seating chart. I thought you might appreciate seeing how things operate behind the scenes, Claire. With your background in event planning. The emphasis made her meaning clear to everyone within earshot. I wasn't a guest. I was staff who had somehow stumbled into their world. That night, I confronted Jason about his mother's behavior. He sighed, running his hands through his hair in frustration, not with his family but with me. Mom's old-fashioned, Claire. She just needs time to adjust. You have to understand, she expected me to marry someone like Melissa Blackwell or Sarah Cavendish, people we've known our whole lives. People with the right pedigree, you mean? The word tasted bitter on my tongue. His silence was confirmation enough. The pattern continued. Thomas Wright, Jason's father and CEO of Wright Delicacies, summoned me to his office one afternoon. The company had been in the family for generations, their gourmet food products stocked in high-end stores nationwide. The headquarters occupied a restored historic building downtown, all polished brass and mahogany. I arrived in a new suit, thinking perhaps this was an olive branch. Maybe Thomas had finally recognized that my business degree might be an asset to the family company. Claire. He nodded without standing or offering his hand. Jason mentioned you've been looking for a position since graduation. Hope fluttered in my chest. Sir. My focus was marketing and product development. Thomas regarded me like I was a mildly interesting specimen under a microscope. We have an opening in the mailroom. It would give you a ground-level understanding of business operations. Where you belong, so to speak. The deliberate insult hung between us. I have a business degree, I said quietly. With honors. From Westfield State, he replied, not bothering to hide his disdain. This is a privilege, Claire. Most people would jump at the chance to get their foot in the door here, regardless of where they started. That evening, I overheard Jason on the phone as I approached our bedroom door. Dad, you can't seriously have offered her the mailroom. His voice was low, defensive at first, giving me a moment of hope before he continued. Yes, I understand she needs to earn her place, but... I held my breath, pressing closer to the door. You're right, Jason said after a long pause. She does have potential to improve. With the right guidance, she could eventually become presentable at company functions. Yes, I know what I'm taking on here. Taking on. Like I was a burden. A project. My fingers traced the engagement ring I once thought symbolized love but now felt more like a collar. Yet still I stayed, telling myself Jason would stand up to them eventually. That he loved me for who I was, not who they wanted me to become. The final humiliation arrived in an elegant silver box 1 week before our wedding day. Inside was a certificate for the Elizabeth Morrison Finishing School Executive Spouse Program, a 12-week course covering everything from proper table settings to conversational French. The handwritten note from Vivian read, "Perhaps this will help you belong. Best wishes, Mother Wright." My hands trembled as I showed Jason, hoping he would finally be as outraged as I was. Instead, his face brightened. See? Mom's making an effort. This is actually really thoughtful, Claire. These are skills that will help you navigate our world. Your world. The words escaped before I could stop them. I thought we were building our world. Together. He kissed my forehead, patronizing. Of course we are. But you have to admit there are certain things you weren't taught growing up. This is just filling in the gaps. In that moment, standing in our kitchen with the gift between us, I should have walked away. I should have seen that Jason Wright would never choose me over his family's approval, that he fundamentally agreed with their assessment of my worth. Instead, I walked down the aisle 3 days later, my father's arm linked through mine, my mother dabbing proud tears from her eyes in the front row. The right side of the church was filled with politicians, CEOs, and old-money Boston families who watched me with polite smiles and calculating eyes. I now pronounce you husband and wife. As Jason slipped the wedding band next to my engagement ring, I caught Vivian's eye over his shoulder. Her smile was victorious. The message was clear. The battle had just begun, and in her mind she was already winning. What none of them knew was that behind my teary bridal smile, something had hardened inside me. A seed of resolve planted by their cruelty would one day grow into the strength to walk away, and eventually to take everything they valued. But first I would learn exactly what I was up against. Married life in the Wright family was like drowning in slow motion. Each day another inch of water rose around me and no one else seemed to notice or care. Our first Thanksgiving as a married couple should have been a celebration. Instead, it became a ritual of exclusion that would repeat at every family gathering to follow. We gathered at the Wright estate, where Thomas carved the turkey with ceremonial precision while Vivian directed the staff with imperious gestures. When it came time for family photos, I stood beside Jason, smoothing my carefully selected dress. One Vivian had reluctantly approved. "Why don't you take the picture, Claire?" Vivian suggested, her voice sweet as poison. "You have such a good eye for these things." Before I could respond, a camera was thrust into my hands. I watched through the viewfinder as the Wright family, my family now supposedly, arranged themselves in perfect formation. Jason didn't even glance back as he took his place between his parents. "Smile," I instructed, my voice hollow. Later when I mentioned it to Jason, he shrugged. "Mom just wants good family photos. We'll take one with you next time." But next time never came. At Christmas, I was dispatched to the kitchen to check on dessert, just as the photographer arrived. At Easter, I was tasked with entertaining distant cousins' children during the main family portrait. Each time Jason's protests grew weaker, his excuses more practiced. I existed in the margins of the Wright family history, present but unrecorded, like a ghost haunting their perfect tableau. 6 months into our marriage, Jason began leaving fashion magazines on our coffee table, pages folded to articles about refreshing your look and subtle enhancements. "Darling," he said one evening as I flipped through yet another magazine he'd left out, "have you ever thought about doing something with your nose? Nothing major, just a little refinement." I touched my nose reflexively. "What's wrong with my nose?" Jason sat beside me, taking my hand in his. "Nothing's wrong with it. It's just that Mom mentioned." He stopped himself, but it was too late. "Your mother discussed my nose?" The hurt was instantaneous, like a slap. "She only wants what's best for us," Jason said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd come to dread. "The annual shareholders meeting is coming up. You'll be photographed for the company newsletter. She thought you might want to present the best possible image." "For the Wright family brand, you mean?" My voice had gone cold. "Well, yes. It's important. You're a reflection of me now, and I'm a reflection of the company." The suggestions continued, growing more frequent and specific. My hair was too ordinary. Perhaps highlights would add sophistication. My jawline could use slight contouring. Even my walk wasn't right, too casual, lacking proper posture. Each criticism chipped away at the woman I'd been, replacing her with a project forever failing to meet specifications. The confidence that had once made Jason notice me at that charity event faded like a photograph left in the sun. The annual Wright Foundation Charity Gala marked our 1-year anniversary. I spent weeks preparing, studying guest lists, memorizing connections between Boston's elite families, practicing small talk about topics that interested the Wright circle. I even relented to Jason's pressure and had my hair styled the way Vivian preferred, an elegant updo that made me look more like her than myself. That night, I wore a black dress that cost more than my first car, standing beside Jason as he greeted investors and business associates with practiced charm. Vivian approached with a silver-haired man in an expensive suit. "Charles, I'd like you to meet Jennifer, Jason's wife," she said, her hand resting briefly on my arm. "It's Claire," I corrected automatically. Charles looked between us, sensing the tension. "Oh, of course. Claire." Vivian's laugh tinkled like broken glass. "I was just thinking of Jennifer Lopez. Doesn't she look a bit like her, Charles? Something about the features." The implication was clear. I was interchangeable with any other non-WASP face. Not worth remembering. Not worthy of the right name. Jason watched the exchange with a tight smile, saying nothing. Later, it happened twice more. Vivian introducing me as Jessica to a judge, then as Kathy to a congressman's wife. Each time Jason's defense grew weaker, until he stopped correcting her altogether. "It's just a slip of the tongue," he insisted on the ride home. "Mom meets hundreds of people at these events. She doesn't forget anyone else's name," I said quietly. "She remembers the housekeeper's 4 children by name." "You're being oversensitive. It's been a long night." He turned away, ending the conversation. That night, while Jason slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and wondered when exactly I had become invisible in my own marriage. The final betrayal began with an ordinary Tuesday. Jason had left his briefcase in the hall when he rushed out for an early meeting. I noticed it while heading out for coffee with a friend, my increasingly rare attempt at maintaining a life outside the right orbit. I grabbed the briefcase, intending to drop it off at his office on my way. Inside my car, it tipped over, spilling some contents onto the passenger seat. As I gathered the papers, my hand froze over a small paper bag from a pharmacy. Inside were 2 pregnancy test kits with a yellow sticky note attached. Vanessa, potential mother of a true right heir. Pick up champagne if positive. V. The handwriting was unmistakably Vivian's. The implication was unmistakably devastating. Who was Vanessa? My mind raced through every conversation, every event, every introduction. Then I remembered, Vanessa Holt, the daughter of Senator Holt, who had attended several rite functions. Tall, blonde, impeccably bred, with family connections tracing back to the Mayflower. Everything I wasn't. I replaced everything exactly as I'd found it and delivered the briefcase to Jason's assistant without seeing him. That night I waited for him to mention it. To explain. To at least have the decency to lie to my face. Instead, he announced he would be working late all week preparing for the annual company retreat. The Berkshire property this weekend? I asked, my voice carefully neutral. Yes, all the executives and their spouses. He didn't meet my eyes. Except you shouldn't come this year. Mom thinks it's better to keep it strictly business. High-pressure negotiations with overseas partners. The retreat was always a family affair. Spouses were always included. Another exclusion, another erasure. I understand, I said, though I understood far more than he realized. Friday morning, after Jason left for the retreat, I made a decision. I drove to the Berkshire property, a sprawling lodge where the Wrights entertained important clients. I parked down the road and walked the familiar path through the woods that led to the back of the property. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the main lodge, I could see them all. Thomas holding court with executives, Vivian directing staff, various company officials mingling. And there was Jason, not in a business meeting, but sitting intimately close to a blonde woman on a secluded couch near the fireplace. Vanessa. Her hand rested on his arm as they laughed about something private. I watched, frozen, as Vivian approached them, beaming with approval. She handed them each a glass of champagne, raising her own in a toast I couldn't hear. I didn't need to. The celebration was clear. The future they were planning, one that didn't include me, was evident in every smile, every touch, every conspiratorial glance. As I turned to leave, numb with the final confirmation of my disposability, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the darkened window. A ghost at the edges of their world, watching a life that was never truly mine. That night, alone in the house Jason and I supposedly shared, I finally understood. The systematic destruction of my confidence, my identity, my place in the family. It had all been leading to this moment. I hadn't been a wife. I'd been a placeholder until someone worthy came along. I was nothing to them. But as I dried my tears and began to pack my things, I made a silent promise to myself. Someday I would be everything. I signed the divorce papers with a steady hand despite my shattering heart. The Wright family attorney watched me with barely concealed disdain, a man who'd spent the past month trying to bully me into accepting nothing while walking away. You understand that by waiving alimony, you're entitled only to what you brought into the marriage, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. I understand exactly what I'm walking away from, I replied, meeting his gaze. What he didn't know was that I had already taken something far more valuable than money. For 3 weeks while Jason was working late with Vanessa, I had been working late too, meticulously copying information from Jason's home office. Contract details, supplier agreements, production schedules. Jason, so certain of my irrelevance, had never bothered to hide his work files. His password was still our wedding date, a date he'd soon be eager to forget. Wright Delicacy's entire supply chain lay exposed in those documents. Their dependency on 3 key suppliers who provided their signature ingredients, exclusivity contracts set to expire within 2 years, and their shocking markup on products marketed as artisanal but mass-produced in factories that cut corners on quality. Most valuable was a folder marked International Expansion, Thomas Wright's 5-year plan to enter Asian markets with watered-down versions of their premium products. The margins would be astronomical, the quality compromised. Classic Wright business ethics. I walked out of the attorney's office owning nothing but the clothes on my back, my business degree, and the blueprint for the Wright family's vulnerabilities. They thought I was leaving with nothing. I knew I was leaving with everything I needed. My first stop wasn't a new apartment or a friend's couch. It was a bus terminal with a one-way ticket to Portland, Oregon, as far from Boston's claustrophobic social circles as I could reasonably get. The distance wasn't just geographical, it was existential. Claire Wright would disappear, and from her ashes, a new Claire Thompson would emerge. Portland welcomed me with its misty mornings and coffee shop entrepreneurs. I found a tiny studio apartment above a bookstore and paid 3 months' rent in advance, the last of my personal savings. That first night, sleeping on a bare mattress with rain tapping against the windows, I felt something unexpected: freedom. The transformation began the next morning. I walked into a salon with my long Wright-approved brown hair and walked out with a sharp auburn bob that would have given Vivian heart palpitations. The stylist, a woman with tattoo sleeves and kind eyes, studied my face as I sat in her chair. "This isn't just a haircut, is it?" she asked as she began cutting. "It's an exorcism," I replied, watching pieces of my old life fall to the floor. Next came the wardrobe. Gone were the conservative dresses and pearls that had never felt like me. I embraced colors and patterns that expressed rather than suppressed. Each new item was a declaration: I am not what they made me. The final touch was unexpected. A flyer for a voice and speech coach caught my eye outside a theater. Patricia was a former Broadway actress who now helped people find their authentic voice. During our first session, she listened to me speak, then nodded knowingly. "You've been trained to soften your natural cadence," she observed. "To round your vowels and adopt someone else's patterns. Boston Brahmin patterns, if I'm not mistaken." I hadn't even realized how thoroughly I'd internalized Vivian's speech lessons, how I'd been forced to erase the subtle Midwestern inflections from my childhood. "I want my voice back," I told Patricia. "Not just how I sound, but what I say." Over the next 3 months, as I reclaimed my authentic speech patterns, something else happened. I found my voice as a businesswoman too. The blueprint was taking shape. Then came the letter that changed everything. My grandmother Rose had passed away quietly in her sleep. We'd been close when I was growing up, but the Wright years had created distance. Another relationship sacrificed on the altar of my marriage. Now she was gone, and along with my grief came an unexpected inheritance: $30,000 and a box of personal effects. The money was a lifeline, but it was the box that proved priceless. Among her belongings were journals dating back to the 1960s, when she had worked as a recipe developer for a small specialty foods company called Heartland Harvest. The entries detailed her development of preserve recipes using unique combinations of fruits and herbs, recipes that sounded eerily familiar. One entry from September 1967 caught my eye. "Mr. Wright toured the facility today. Took special interest in my blackberry sage preserve. Asked many questions about the balance of sweetness with the herb notes. Said it was revolutionary. I'm flattered but wary of his interest." 3 months later, Heartland closed suddenly. "Sold to investors," they said. Today I saw my blackberry sage preserve in stores, with the Wright Delicacies label. No credit, no compensation. Mr. Thomas Wright Sr. stole my work and is making a fortune. No one will believe a woman over a powerful man. I sat among my grandmother's things, stunned by the revelation. The signature Wright Delicacies blackberry sage preserve, their most profitable product for decades, had been stolen from my grandmother. The irony was almost too perfect. Wright Delicacies had been built on theft, just as their son had stolen years of my life. Grandmother Rose had given me more than seed money, she'd given me moral clarity. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice, about reclaiming what had been taken from both of us. With new purpose, I began researching Wright Delicacies' business practices more thoroughly. Through professional networking events, I accidentally bumped into Margaret Chin, who had been Wright's product development director before being abruptly terminated last year. Over coffee, Margaret's bitterness spilled out along with her insider knowledge. Thomas had me developing this whole line of organic, sustainably sourced products. I created everything: supplier relationships, production methods, marketing concepts. Then he pulled the plug, said it wasn't on brand. 2 weeks later, I was let go because my position was redundant. She leaned forward, voice dropping. But here's the thing, Thomas is wrong. The market is shifting towards sustainability. Right Delicacies is so focused on tradition they can't see the future. They're vulnerable. Margaret wasn't the only one. I systematically connected with 6 former Right employees, each sharing pieces of the puzzle. David from accounting revealed their cash flow weaknesses. Sarah from marketing explained how their brand was failing to connect with younger consumers. Carlos from operations detailed their outdated production facilities. Each conversation was carefully casual, each relationship cultivated without revealing my true connection to the Right family. I was just Claire Thompson, a business school graduate interested in the specialty food industry. My Right past was buried under my new appearance, new voice, new state, invisible but informing every move. The final piece fell into place during a sustainable business conference where I met Liam Carter, a food industry angel investor with a passion for ethical business practices. Unlike Jason, Liam actually listened when I spoke, his eyes lighting up as I outlined my vision for a different kind of food company. The problem with traditional food corporations is they're built on exploitation of workers, of consumers, of the environment, I explained, thinking of my grandmother's stolen recipes. There's room for a company that does better while doing well financially. Liam studied my business plan with growing excitement. This isn't just idealistic, it's strategically brilliant. You've identified real market gaps. What I didn't tell him was that those gaps were specifically the ones Right Delicacies had created or ignored. Every aspect of my business plan for Thompson Roots was designed not just to succeed, but to succeed at their expense. Where Right Delicacies was hierarchical, Thompson Roots would be collaborative. Where they exploited suppliers, we would partner with them. Where they cut corners on quality to increase profits, we would prioritize integrity. And we would begin with a blackberry sage preserve based on my grandmother's original recipe, the one that had launched the Right empire. I'd like to be your silent partner, Liam offered after our third meeting. You have the vision and the drive. I have the capital and connections. 1 month later, Thompson Roots consisted of 1 employee, me, working out of a small commercial kitchen with my grandmother's journals open beside me as I recreated her recipes. But in my mind I could already see the empire it would become. An empire built specifically to dismantle the House of Right, brick by brick. They had spent years making me invisible. Little did they know, invisibility had become my superpower. Thompson Roots grew like the very plants we championed, organically, steadily reaching toward the light. Our first year was lean but purposeful. While Right Delicacies mass-produced their preserves in industrial facilities, I built relationships with small Oregon farms, ensuring every ingredient in our jars could be traced to its source. The farm-to-table model wasn't just ethical, it was strategic. Right Delicacies relied on large-scale suppliers who provided lower-quality ingredients at volume discounts. Their contracts had exclusivity clauses but only with major producers. The small family-owned farms I partnered with flew completely beneath their radar. I don't understand why you're bothering with these tiny operations, Liam said during our quarterly review. The profit margins would be higher if we consolidated suppliers. I showed him the numbers I'd never share publicly, our projected growth curve intersecting with Right Delicacies' market share in exactly 3 years. Every jar we sell is one they don't. Every farm we partner with strengthens local agriculture, which happens to be the exact opposite of Right's industrialized approach. Liam's eyes widened as understanding dawned. You're not just building a company. You're building an anti-right machine. I prefer to think of it as justice with a business plan, I replied. Each decision I made served dual purposes. When I chose eco-friendly packaging, it wasn't just to appeal to environmentally conscious consumers. It was because Right Delicacies had invested millions in proprietary plastic containers that were becoming increasingly unpopular with younger demographics. When I prioritized fair wages and profit sharing for employees, it wasn't just ethical business practice. It was because Right's notoriously high turnover created constant quality control issues they struggled to address. When I focused on transparency in our supply chain, highlighting the names and stories of our farmers on each label, it wasn't just good marketing. It was because Right's deliberately obscured sourcing was becoming a liability in an age where consumers demanded authenticity. Our modest success in the Pacific Northwest might have continued at that measured pace if not for a chance encounter at a food industry conference in Seattle. I was presenting a session on sustainable business models when I noticed a woman in the back row watching me with unusual intensity. Something in her sharp gaze reminded me of someone, though I couldn't place who. She approached afterward, extending her hand. Catherine Holt. Impressive presentation. The name hit me like a physical blow. Holt. As in Senator Holt. As in Vanessa Holt, the woman Jason had betrayed me with. I maintained my composure, shaking her hand with a smile that revealed nothing of my internal shock. Claire Thompson. Thank you for coming. Your approach to ethical business is refreshing, she said. I've spent 10 years in corporate marketing watching companies pretend to care about sustainability while doing the bare minimum. I'd love to hear more about Thompson Roots. Over coffee, Catherine revealed she was Vanessa's older sister, though they hadn't spoken in years. Family estrangement is my personal specialty, she said with a bitter laugh. My father groomed Vanessa to be the perfect political accessory, pretty, polished, and utterly without principles. I refused to play that game. I studied her, weighing risks against opportunities. What happened between you two? Catherine's expression darkened. I blew the whistle on some questionable campaign finance practices in my father's last senatorial race. Vanessa was furious, not because he'd done anything wrong but because I'd threatened the family image. That's all that matters to people like them. She paused, sipping her coffee. I hear she's engaged to some food industry heir now. Poor guy probably has no idea what he's in for. I almost laughed at the irony. If only she knew. 2 weeks later, Catherine Holt became Thompson Roots marketing director. Her insider knowledge of how families like the Holts and Wrights operated proved invaluable. More importantly, her casual mentions of Vanessa's activities with her fiancé Jason kept me informed of my ex-husband's life without ever having to explain why I cared. Vanessa called me out of the blue yesterday, Catherine mentioned casually one afternoon as we reviewed packaging designs. Trying to mend fences apparently. Says she and Jason are having problems. He's drinking too much, the family business is struggling with new market pressures, her words. I think she's realizing that marrying into money isn't all she thought it would be. I kept my expression neutral while satisfaction bloomed inside me. Market pressures? How unfortunate. With Catherine's guidance, Thompson Roots launched a documentary series called From Soil to Table that streamed on our website and social media channels. Each episode highlighted a different aspect of ethical food production: sustainable farming, fair labor practices, transparency in ingredients. We never mentioned Wright delicacies by name. We didn't have to. The contrast between our methods and theirs was implicit in every frame, every interview with happy farmers and workers, every close-up of natural ingredients being transformed through traditional methods. The series went viral in food-conscious circles, earning features in culinary magazines and sustainability blogs. Each new follower, each new customer was another thread in the web I was weaving, a web designed specifically to entangle Wright delicacies. Our growing success required expansion. I deliberately targeted regions where Wright had their strongest distribution: Boston, New York, Chicago. Each Thompson Roots jar on those shelves directly competed with Wright products, often positioned right beside them thanks to strategic slotting fees I'd budgeted for precisely this purpose. The Northeast expansion is cutting deeper into operating capital than we projected, Liam warned during our fourth-year review. Are you sure the Boston market is worth this level of investment? I showed him the latest sales figures. Boston consumers are switching to our products at twice the rate of other markets. Trust me, this is exactly where we need to be. What I didn't tell him was that I'd arranged for something special in the Boston rollout. A blind taste test marketing campaign where consumers compared unlabeled preserves and voted for their favorite. Our blackberry sage preserve, my grandmother's original recipe, consistently outperformed Wright's version by significant margins. But my most satisfying strategy was also the most personal. When Thompson Roots expanded to the East Coast, I initiated what I called our executive feedback program. Under the guise of market research, we sent carefully curated gift baskets to influential business leaders in the food industry, including, of course, the entire Wright family. The feedback forms returned with effusive praise. Thomas Wright himself wrote, "Exceptional quality and depth of flavor. Reminds me of how preserves used to taste before mass production. Vivian noted, elegant packaging and sophisticated flavor profiles. This would be appropriate for even the most discerning tables. Jason? His comments were the most gratifying, superior to anything currently on the market. Right Delicacies should consider this a serious competitor. I kept those feedback forms in a special folder, reading them on difficult days when doubts crept in. They hadn't recognized my company name. They certainly wouldn't recognize me when the time came for our paths to cross again. Thompson Roots was still small compared to Right Delicacies, a David to their Goliath. But I had something they didn't: intimate knowledge of their weaknesses, their blind spots, their vulnerabilities. And unlike them, I had nothing to lose. The spider's web was nearly complete. All that remained was to draw them in for the final confrontation. A meeting that would occur at the upcoming National Food Innovation Gala, where industry leaders gathered to network and showcase their latest products. The Wrights would be there. They were always there, basking in their legacy status. This year, Thompson Roots had been nominated for the Rising Star Award, an honor that would put us on the main stage. An honor that would ensure the Wrights would be watching when I stepped up to the microphone. They had discarded me, believing I would disappear into insignificance. Instead, I had transformed into their most dangerous adversary, one they couldn't see coming until it was too late. 7 years of careful planning was about to culminate in a single moment of recognition. And I was ready. 2 weeks before the National Food Innovation Gala, I orchestrated what would appear to be a coincidence but was, in fact, the opening move in my endgame. Lawrence Barrett, Right Delicacies' largest investor, would be speaking at a sustainable business panel in Boston. I made sure Thompson Roots sponsored the coffee break immediately following his session. Lawrence was exactly as Catherine had described him. Mid-60s, impeccably dressed, with the sharp eyes of someone who built his fortune by seeing opportunities others missed. I approached him as he added cream to his coffee. "Mr. Barrett? Claire Thompson, founder of Thompson Roots. Your panel insights were fascinating." His handshake was firm, his smile practiced. "Thompson Roots, the preserves company from Oregon, correct? Impressive growth trajectory. You've been following our progress?" I asked, feigning surprise. "I follow everything in the specialty foods sector." He studied me with new interest. "Your Rising Star nomination is well-deserved." We chatted about market trends and sustainability initiatives. Then carefully I steered the conversation toward his investment portfolio. "I understand you're a significant investor in Right Delicacies," I said. "Their traditional approach certainly dominated the market for decades." Barrett's expression shifted subtly at my use of past tense. "Thomas Wright has built a remarkable legacy." "Legacy is a powerful word," I agreed. Though I sometimes wonder if traditional companies can adapt quickly enough to changing consumer preferences. Our research shows millennials and Gen Z are willing to pay premium prices, but only for genuine transparency and ethical sourcing. I shared selected data from our market analysis. Information that directly highlighted Right Delicacies' vulnerabilities without ever naming them. Barrett asked increasingly pointed questions. His concern was palpable. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation over dinner next week," he suggested as we parted. "I'd be delighted," I replied, knowing that by then he would be researching Thompson Roots thoroughly and questioning his Right Delicacies investment. The next day, Catherine burst into my office, her face flushed with excitement. "You won't believe what my sister just told me. She's filing for divorce." My heart skipped a beat. "Vanessa is leaving Jason?" She said he's become impossible to live with. Apparently, Right Delicacies is in serious financial trouble. Multiple suppliers are threatening to break contracts over late payments. Jason's drinking heavily and Thomas is refusing to change strategies despite falling market share. I kept my expression neutral. "How unfortunate." "Here's the kicker," Catherine continued, leaning forward conspiratorially. "Vanessa is already seeing someone else, Congressman Andrew Fitzgerald. She told me she needs to secure her future with someone who still has one." The ruthless calculation was so perfectly Vanessa, so perfectly right adjacent, that I almost admired it. Jason had served his purpose in her life just as I once had in his. The symmetry was poetic. "The gala is going to be awkward for them," I observed, imagining Jason's humiliation. "Especially since they'll both be there." Catherine's eyes widened. You know what this means for our plan, right? Jason will be vulnerable. Distracted. Perfect timing, I agreed. Our plan to acquire right delicacies had just become significantly easier. The night of the gala arrived with perfect dramatic timing. A light snow fell over Boston as my car pulled up to the historic hotel venue. I stepped out wearing a gown the color of blackberries, my grandmother's locket around my neck containing a small photo of her, my silent partner in this 7-year journey. Inside, the ballroom glittered with crystal and ambition. Industry leaders networked over champagne while screens displayed the nominated companies. Thompson Roots' promotional video played alongside those of much larger corporations, including Right Delicacies. I spotted them immediately across the room. Thomas looking older but still imposing, Vivian elegant in midnight blue, surveying the crowd like a general, and Jason handsome as ever but with new lines etched around his eyes, a glass of scotch already in hand. Vanessa was notably absent. I circulated carefully, staying out of their line of sight. Lawrence Barrett caught my eye and nodded meaningfully. Our dinner conversation had clearly had the intended effect. Phase 1, complete. The Rising Star Award was announced midway through the evening. When they called Thompson Roots, applause filled the room. I approached the podium, noticing the Wright family's polite but disinterested expressions. They didn't recognize me, not yet. Thank you, I began, my voice steady. Thompson Roots was born from a simple belief that food should nourish not just our bodies, but our communities and our planet. As I spoke about our journey, I saw Lawrence Barrett approach Thomas Wright, whispering something in his ear. Thomas straightened, his gaze suddenly locked on me with new intensity. The first flicker of doubt. After the ceremony, I circulated strategically until I found myself face to face with Jason. 7 years had changed us both, but while time had added shadows to his features, it had given me a confidence that radiated from within. Congratulations on your award, he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. Impressive for such a new company. Thank you, Jason, I replied, watching for recognition at the sound of his name. Nothing. I believe business should be built on integrity, not just profits. He nodded absently, clearly not connecting this stranger with his past. If you'll excuse me, I need to speak with our investors. Of course, I smiled. I believe they're quite interested in speaking with you too. I watched him walk away satisfied. The real confrontation would come tomorrow, in the Right Delicacies boardroom. The following morning, I arrived precisely on time for the meeting Lawrence Barrett had arranged. A potential investment opportunity, he told the Wrights. They didn't yet know I was there to buy them out. Thomas Wright's face registered confusion when I entered the boardroom. Miss Thompson? I don't understand. I placed a folder on the table. My analysis of Right Delicacies' current position and Thompson Roots' offer to acquire controlling interest. The shock in the room was palpable. Jason nearly choked on his coffee. This is absurd. We're not selling to a startup. Your company's market value has declined 30% in 2 years, I stated calmly. 3 major suppliers are considering breaking contracts. Your core demographic is literally dying off, and younger consumers find your brand outdated and ethically questionable. Thomas's face flushed with anger. How could you possibly know about our supplier issues? The same way I know about your cash flow problems and the loans you've taken against your family estate, I replied. Due diligence. Jason glared at Barrett. This is a hostile takeover. This is business, Barrett replied. The board has already voted to accept the offer, contingent on today's meeting. I slid the acquisition contract across the table. Jason picked it up, his hands trembling slightly as he flipped through the pages. Sign it, Thomas ordered, his voice resigned. We can't fight this. As Jason's pen hesitated over the signature line, I decided it was time. I reached up and removed my grandmother's locket, opening it to reveal her photograph. Before you sign, you might want to know who you're selling to, I said quietly. Jason looked up, irritation crossing his features, then froze. The pen slipped from his fingers, spattering ink across the contract. Claire. His voice was barely a whisper. Hello, Jason. It's been 7 years. Vivian gasped, finally connecting the dots. Impossible. I believe the term you preferred was unworthy, I replied, my gaze steady. Funny how things change. Jason signed the contract in stunned silence, unable to form words. As he pushed it back toward me, I slid another document forward. My grandmother's journal entry about the stolen blackberry sage preserve recipe. You should know that Thompson Root's success wasn't just about business strategy, I explained. It was about reclaiming what was stolen, including my grandmother Rose Thompson's original recipes that built Wright Delicacy's reputation. Thomas's face drained of color as he recognized the recipe details. His hand clutched at his chest, his breathing suddenly labored. This is slander. This is documented fact, I corrected as Vivian rushed to her husband's side. Perhaps you should call a doctor. As paramedics stabilized Thomas for what turned out to be a mild heart attack, I completed the acquisition paperwork. By afternoon, Thompson Roots officially owned Wright Delicacies. My final act was perhaps the most personal. That evening I drove to the Wright estate, my company's property now, though I'd allow them to remain there temporarily. On the doorstep, I left a single jar of blackberry sage preserve in Wright Delicacies packaging, but with a Thompson Roots label carefully placed over it. Attached was a handwritten note, reclaimed, not stolen, just like my worth. 7 years earlier I had walked away with nothing but my name and my dignity. Now I had returned to take everything else. Not out of vengeance but justice, for myself, for my grandmother, for everyone the Wrights had deemed unworthy. In the game they'd started, I'd achieved what they never expected. Checkmate. If this story of sweet revenge had you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button right now. Was it when Claire discovered the background check folder? Or maybe when she finally revealed herself in that boardroom? What was your favorite moment from Claire's journey? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Looking for more stories of karma and justice? Check out my playlist.